Have you ever had the strange feeling that your life looks familiar, yet somehow you no longer feel at home inside it? You wake up, move through your responsibilities, answer people, solve problems, make plans, and carry on. From the outside, perhaps very little seems wrong. But somewhere beneath all the activity, there is a quiet feeling you cannot quite explain. Something within you seems to be whispering, "Come back." Maybe you have felt it in the silence just before sleep. Maybe it appears after a difficult conversation when you realize how tired you are of trying to be understood. Maybe it comes when you look at your life and wonder why you have worked so hard to become someone who still does not feel peaceful. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is that this quiet calling does not necessarily mean something is wrong with your life. It may simply mean that you have wandered too far from yourself. We spend so much of our lives learning who we are supposed to be. As children, we notice what brings approval and what brings disappointment. We learn which parts of ourselves make other people comfortable. We learn when to speak and when to remain silent. Later, the world gives us more identities to carry. Be successful, be attractive, be useful, be strong, be agreeable, be impressive, be needed. And without realizing it, we can slowly begin living from these borrowed definitions. Then one day you may discover that you have become very skilled at being the person everyone expects, yet you have forgotten what it feels like simply to be yourself. This is where the spiritual journey often begins, not with acquiring something new, but with noticing what has been covering what was already there. Imagine the sky on a stormy afternoon. Heavy clouds move across it, and for a while they seem to occupy everything you can see, yet the sky itself has not disappeared. It has not been damaged by the storm. It has simply been obscured. Your thoughts can be like those clouds. Your fears can be clouds. Your regrets, disappointments, labels, and judgments can become clouds. Even the story you have repeated about yourself for 20 years can become so convincing that you mistake it for the sky. But perhaps you are not the storm. Perhaps you are the awareness in which the storm is passing. There is a part of you that can notice your fear without becoming the fear. There is something within you that can observe an anxious thought and quietly say, "I am aware that I am thinking this." That small space between awareness and thought is extraordinarily important. Because the moment you can observe a thought, you begin to recognize that you are more than the thought. The ego would like to turn every experience into an identity. You were rejected, so it says you are unwanted. You made a mistake, so it says you are a failure. Someone left, so it says you were not enough. You are uncertain about the future, so it tells you that you are unsafe. And because these conclusions are repeated so often, they can begin to sound like your own voice. But are they? This is a question worth sitting with. How many things you believe about yourself were actually chosen consciously by you, and how many were collected from people, experiences, disappointments, comparisons, and moments of fear? You may have spent years trying to repair an identity that was never your deepest identity in the first place. This does not mean ignoring your wounds. It does not mean pretending that painful experiences did not matter. Your grief deserves tenderness. Your disappointments deserve understanding. The frightened versions of you that learned how to survive deserve compassion rather than criticism. But compassion is very different from identification. You can honor what happened without deciding that what happened is who you are. A tree carries marks from every season it has survived. Some branches have been broken by storms. Some years brought abundant rain, while others brought drought. Yet the tree does not spend the spring arguing with the winter that came before it. When warmth returns, something within the tree simply responds to life again. Perhaps something within you is responding now. Maybe that is what you have been calling restlessness. Maybe your exhaustion is not only because you have too much to do. Perhaps part of your exhaustion comes from carrying identities that have become too heavy. The one who must keep everyone happy. The one who cannot disappoint anyone. The one who always has to be strong. The one who needs approval before making a choice. The one who must understand everything before trusting life. Imagine how much energy is required to maintain these identities every day. You monitor how others see you. You replay conversations. You wonder whether you said the wrong thing. You compare your life with someone else's life. You imagine futures that have not happened. You try to control outcomes because uncertainty feels frightening. And beneath all of this movement is something remarkably still. The source within you does not need to compete for attention. Love does not shout the way fear does. Peace does not argue its case. It waits. That may be why moments of silence can sometimes feel uncomfortable at first. When the noise stops, you begin hearing what has been underneath it. You may hear sadness you have avoided. You may recognize resentment you have carried for years. You may realize how harshly you have spoken to yourself. But if you remain present a little longer, without judging what appears, something gentler may begin to emerge. You may sense that underneath all the stories there is still a presence that has never condemned you. This is the presence you are being invited to remember. Your soul is not calling you because you have failed at becoming who you were supposed to be. It may be calling because you no longer need to become who you were supposed to be. There is a profound difference. One path says, I must improve myself until I finally deserve peace. The other quietly asks, what if peace is part of my nature and I have simply covered it with fear? What if the journey is not about adding another identity? What if it is about releasing the judgment that says you should already have everything figured out, releasing resentment that keeps yesterday alive inside today, releasing the need to receive permission from people who may never understand your path, releasing the belief that your worth rises and falls according to how the world responds to you. You do not have to release everything at once. Even noticing what you are carrying can be an act of awakening. Awareness does not fight darkness, it simply brings light. And perhaps this is why your soul's invitation can feel so gentle. It does not say hurry. It does not say prove yourself. It does not say become more worthy. It says remember. Remember the part of you that existed before comparison became a habit. Remember the tenderness beneath your defenses. Remember the quiet intelligence that sometimes knows what is right before your mind produces 1,000 arguments. Remember that your life is more than the collection of judgments you have made about it. And above all, remember that you do not need to travel somewhere far away to find what you have lost. You may simply need to become quiet enough to recognize what never left. Because underneath the fear, underneath the roles, underneath everything you have been trying so hard to become, there is still something untouched, something peaceful, something connected to the same loving source from which all life emerges. And as you begin to notice that presence, another question naturally appears. If this peaceful awareness is closer to your true nature, then who is the voice inside you that keeps insisting you are incomplete? Understanding that voice may be the beginning of your freedom. The voice that insists you are incomplete can be very convincing because it has been with you for so long. It knows your history. It remembers every rejection, every embarrassing moment, every choice you wish you could change. It knows exactly where your insecurities live. And because it speaks in your own mind, you may assume that it must be telling you the truth. But perhaps this voice is not your deepest self at all. Perhaps it is simply the ego trying to protect an identity it has spent years constructing. The ego is not something you need to hate or destroy. Fighting the ego can easily become another form of ego. You begin judging yourself for being afraid, criticizing yourself for wanting approval, or feeling ashamed because you still compare yourself with others. Then the spiritual journey becomes another project of self-rejection. There is another way. You can simply become aware. Imagine sitting beside a river and watching leaves float past. You do not need to jump into the water and chase every leaf. You do not need to determine where each one came from or where it will eventually go. You can notice it, allow it to pass, and remain seated beside the river. Your thoughts can be approached in the same way. A fearful thought appears. Something is going to go wrong. You notice it. A comparative thought appears. Everyone else is further ahead than I am. You notice it. A judgment appears. I should be different by now. You notice that too. The transformation begins when you stop automatically believing everything that passes through your mind. This is awareness. And awareness creates space. Without awareness, fear becomes reality. With awareness, fear becomes an experience occurring within you. Without awareness, judgment becomes truth. With awareness, judgment becomes a thought you are capable of observing. That small distinction can change the way you experience your entire inner world. Consider anxiety. You may wake in the morning and immediately begin thinking about what might happen. Before your feet have touched the floor, your mind has already traveled into tomorrow. It has created conversations that have not occurred, losses that have not happened, and problems that may never exist. The body responds as though these imagined events are already real. Your shoulders tighten. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your mind begins searching for certainty. The ego says, if I can predict everything, I can finally relax. But life does not offer that kind of certainty. And so you keep searching. You check again. You rethink the decision. You replay the conversation. You ask another person what they think. You imagine another possible outcome. Yet certainty remains just beyond your reach. Perhaps peace was never hidden inside certainty. Perhaps peace begins when you discover that you can be present even while life remains uncertain. Think about a river again. The river does not know every turn before it reaches it. It simply meets the landscape as it comes. When a rock appears, the water does not spend years resenting the rock. It moves around it. When the land becomes steep, the river moves quickly. When the land becomes wide and level, the river slows. Its strength comes partly from its willingness to flow. Human beings often do the opposite. We decide how the river should move, and then we suffer when life chooses another direction. You may have imagined a relationship lasting forever. Then it ended. You may have believed a particular opportunity would finally give your life meaning. Then it disappeared. You may have pictured yourself reaching a certain age with everything settled, only to arrive there with new questions. And sometimes the deepest pain is not simply what happened. It is the argument you continue having with what happened. This should not have ended. They should have treated me differently. I should have made another choice. My life should look different by now. Notice the word should. The ego loves the world of should because it allows you to compare reality with an imaginary version of reality and then remain disappointed by the difference. This does not mean you should never want change. It does not mean accepting mistreatment or remaining passive when something needs your attention. Acceptance is not resignation. Acceptance simply means recognizing what is here before deciding how you wish to respond. You cannot peacefully respond to this moment while spending all your energy insisting that this moment should not exist. A tree does not deny that autumn has arrived. It releases its leaves. There is wisdom in that image. The tree does not interpret the falling leaves as evidence that life has abandoned it. It does not desperately glue the leaves back onto its branches. It participates in the season. What might happen if you allowed certain seasons of your own life to end? There may be a relationship you still carry emotionally even though it ended years ago. There may be an apology you never received. There may be an opportunity you continue imagining. There may be an earlier version of yourself you keep trying to recover. Sometimes we do not realize how much of our present energy is being used to maintain a conversation with the past. The ego says, if I let this go, it means it did not matter. But letting go does not mean something did not matter. It means you are allowing what mattered to take its rightful place in your story without giving it permanent control over your present. This is especially important in relationships. Perhaps you have spent much of your life trying to keep other people comfortable. You learned to sense their moods before noticing your own. You became skilled at knowing what others needed, what they expected, what would disappoint them. People may even praise you for this. You are always there for everyone. You never complain. You are so strong. And perhaps part of you feels proud of being needed, but another part becomes quietly exhausted. You begin saying yes when something inside you means no. You remain silent because honesty might create tension. You change your preferences to avoid disappointing someone. And eventually you may become resentful toward the very people you were trying to please. The resentment is not always because they asked too much. Sometimes it appears because you abandoned yourself while trying to earn love. This is one of the ego's most subtle bargains. If everyone approves of me, then I will be safe. But approval is unstable. One person likes what you do, another dislikes it. Someone understands your choices, someone else misunderstands them. Today you are praised, tomorrow you are criticized. If your peace depends upon agreement from the world, your peace will always belong to the world. Returning to yourself means gently reclaiming it. You can love someone without requiring them to validate your path. You can care deeply without abandoning your inner truth. You can disappoint someone and still be a loving person. You can be misunderstood without turning that misunderstanding into evidence that something is wrong with you. This does not happen overnight. Years of conditioning do not disappear because you hear one beautiful idea. But awareness changes the relationship you have with conditioning. The next time you are about to say yes simply because you fear disappointing someone, you may notice the fear. You may feel it in your body. Instead of immediately obeying it, you can become curious. What am I afraid will happen if I honor what I genuinely feel? Perhaps the answer is they may be upset. Then another question can arise. Can I allow someone to have their feelings without making those feelings a definition of my worth? That is a very different way of living. The same awareness can transform comparison. Comparison is one of the easiest ways to leave yourself. You see someone else's relationship, appearance, home, spiritual journey, confidence, or apparent happiness, and for a moment you abandon the life that is actually happening within you. You begin looking at your seed and wondering why it is not someone else's flower. But nature does not compare in this way. An oak tree does not look toward a rose and conclude that it has failed because it does not produce flowers. The moon does not compete with the sun. The ocean does not apologize because it cannot become a mountain. Each participates in life according to its nature. What would it mean for you to participate in life according to yours? Perhaps your path is quieter than someone else's. Perhaps you need more time. Perhaps something you once believed you wanted no longer feels aligned. Perhaps the life that brings you peace would not impress the people you once wanted to impress. Can you allow that? The ego wants measurement. It wants to know where you stand compared with everyone else. Spirit asks a different question. Am I living in harmony with what feels loving and true within me? That question returns you home. And when you begin returning home, you may notice how much energy you have spent trying to control life. Control often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you are simply being careful. You plan every possibility. You anticipate every problem. You try to manage how people respond, how situations unfold, and what tomorrow will bring. But beneath excessive control, there is often fear. If I stop holding everything together, something terrible may happen. So you grip life more tightly. Yet think about holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes through your fingers. Some parts of life can only be experienced when you stop trying to possess them. Love is like this. Peace is like this. Even purpose can be like this. The more desperately you demand that life reveal your entire purpose, the more frustrated you may become. But when you become present enough to offer kindness here, awareness here, honesty here, and love here, purpose begins to emerge naturally from the quality of your presence. Perhaps purpose is not always a destination waiting somewhere in the future. Perhaps part of your purpose is the consciousness you bring to this moment. The way you listen to someone, the way you forgive, the way you choose not to pass your pain to another person, the way you sit quietly with yourself rather than escaping into distraction, the way you notice the sunset and allow yourself to be there for it. The ego may call these things insignificant because they cannot always be measured, but the soul recognizes them. There is another ego pattern that deserves your compassion, the need to judge. Judgment gives the ego a temporary sense of certainty. If you can label someone as wrong, selfish, foolish, difficult, or unworthy, then for a moment you know where you stand. But judgment has a hidden cost. Whatever energy you repeatedly direct toward another person becomes part of the atmosphere within your own consciousness. If you rehearse anger every day, anger must live somewhere while you rehearse it. It lives in you. If you continually replay someone's betrayal, that person may not be present, but your body still experiences the emotional conversation. This is why forgiveness eventually becomes so important. Not because everyone deserves access to your life, not because harmful behavior should be excused, not because you must pretend that nothing happened. Forgiveness is something quieter and more liberating. It is the gradual decision to stop using your own inner world as a place where yesterday's pain must endlessly repeat itself. You may not be ready to forgive today. That is all right. Perhaps the first step is simply noticing what resentment costs you. You do not need to force love towards someone who hurt you. Forced love is not love. You can begin with willingness. Perhaps one day I will no longer need to carry this. Even that thought creates a small opening. Light enters through openings, and the same compassion you extend toward others must eventually be offered to yourself. Many people are far harsher with themselves than they would ever be with someone they love. You remember mistakes from years ago and still put yourself on trial. You think about the person you used to be and judge that person with the awareness you have today. But the person who made those choices did not possess today's awareness. You were responding from what you knew, what you feared, what you believed, and what you had experienced at that time. What if you stopped standing over your past self as a judge and began sitting beside that person as a compassionate witness? Perhaps you could say inwardly, I understand why you were afraid. I understand why you wanted to be loved. I understand why you stayed. I understand why you left. I understand that you did not know then what you know now. Something softens when understanding replaces condemnation. And softness is not weakness. A seed does not break through the earth because it hates the darkness beneath the soil. It responds to the light. Perhaps your transformation can happen in the same way. You do not need to hate who you have been in order to become more conscious of who you are. You do not need to wage war against fear. You can bring awareness to fear. You do not need to destroy your ego. You can notice when it speaks. You do not need to punish yourself for comparing. You can return your attention to your own path. You do not need to control every outcome. You can meet the next moment when it arrives. This is how freedom begins, not as a dramatic event, but as a series of quiet moments in which you stop abandoning yourself. You notice yourself seeking approval, and you return. You notice yourself arguing with the past, and you return. You notice yourself living in an imaginary future, and you return. You notice yourself judging your own healing, and you return. Again and again, you come back to awareness, back to this breath, back to this moment, back to the presence beneath the noise. And perhaps you begin to understand something beautiful. The soul was never actually far away. You were never spiritually abandoned. The source did not disappear when you became afraid. Love did not leave because you made mistakes. Your true nature did not vanish because someone failed to recognize it. The sun can remain present even when clouds cover the entire sky. So perhaps your work is not to manufacture light. Perhaps it is simply to become aware of what has been standing between you and the light that was already there. And when you begin to see those layers clearly, the fear, the control, the comparison, the resentment, the need for approval, you do not have to tear them away violently. You can meet them with understanding. You can thank the old defenses for trying to protect you. You can recognize that they may once have served a purpose, and then gently you can ask whether you still need them. That question changes everything, because once you stop fighting the person you have been, you become available to remember the presence you have always been. And this is where the journey begins to move even deeper. Awareness shows you the door, but eventually you must become willing to release what keeps you standing outside it. You may have to forgive what you thought could never be forgiven. You may have to surrender an outcome you have been trying to control. You may have to trust life without knowing exactly where it is taking you. And perhaps most tenderly of all, you may have to stop asking the world to give you permission to love the person who has been waiting quietly within you all along. That is where returning to your true self truly begins. Returning to your true self does not happen because you finally solve every problem in your life. It does not happen when everyone understands you, when every wound has disappeared, or when the future becomes perfectly clear. It begins in a much quieter way. It begins when you stop requiring life to be different before you allow yourself to be at peace. For a long time, you may have believed that peace was waiting somewhere ahead of you, after the difficult relationship improves, after the uncertainty ends, after you understand your purpose, after you forgive yourself, after you finally become the person you think you should be. There is always another condition, and because there is always another condition, peace keeps moving into the future. But perhaps peace is not something life gives you after everything has been resolved. Perhaps peace is the presence from which you can meet what remains unresolved. This is one of the quiet invitations of surrender. Surrender does not mean giving up on your life. It does not mean becoming passive or allowing others to decide your path. It means releasing the exhausting belief that you must control every detail of the journey before you can trust it. Think of how much of your suffering has come from trying to know what cannot yet be known. Will this relationship work? Will I be okay? Did I make the right choice? What if I lose what I love? What if I never become who I thought I would become? The mind asks these questions because it wants security. There is nothing shameful about that. The human mind naturally seeks patterns and predictability. But there comes a point when seeking certainty no longer protects you. It simply removes you from the only place where life is actually happening. Here, now, this breath, this moment. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean and demanding that the waves explain themselves before you allow your feet to touch the water. Why did that wave arrive? How large will the next one be? How long till the tide changes? Can you guarantee that the sea will remain calm? The ocean cannot offer such guarantees. Neither can life. Yet there is something peaceful about standing before the ocean when you stop asking it to behave according to your expectations. You listen, you breathe, you watch one wave arrive and another disappear. And perhaps you remember that change is not evidence that life has gone wrong. Change is one of the ways life moves. Some people enter your life and remain for decades. Others walk beside you for a season. Some dreams grow with you. Others become too small for the person you are remembering yourself to be. Some doors open, others remain closed despite everything you do. The ego interprets these movements personally. If this ended, I failed. If they left, I was not enough. If this door closed, life is against me. But the soul may see a larger movement, not punishment, not rejection, simply movement. A leaf falling from a tree is not being rejected by the tree. A season is changing. There may be something in your life right now that you are trying desperately to keep from changing. Perhaps you feel the distance growing in a relationship. Perhaps an old role no longer feels meaningful. Perhaps you are entering a stage of life you once feared. Your body is changing. Your children are growing. People you love are aging. A familiar chapter is closing. And part of you wants to hold everything still. This is understandable. We become attached not only to people, but to versions of ourselves that existed beside those people. We become attached to familiar routines because they tell us who we are. But life continues moving. What if you allowed yourself to move with it? Not carelessly, not without grief, but without turning every ending into evidence that you have lost yourself. You can grieve and still trust. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can feel uncertain and still remain connected to the source within you. You can allow a chapter to close without deciding that the whole story is over. Sometimes the soul calls you home through the very experiences you would never have chosen. A loss can reveal how much you have been depending on the external world for identity. A disappointment can reveal an attachment you could not previously see. A period of loneliness can expose how uncomfortable you have become with your own presence. This does not mean painful events happen for a simple spiritual reason. It does not mean you need to call suffering a blessing while you are hurting. It simply means that even within difficult experiences, you may discover an invitation. The question slowly changes from, why is this happening to me, to, what is this moment showing me about what I have been carrying? That question does not blame you. It frees you to become curious. Maybe a painful relationship is showing you how often you confuse being needed with being loved. Maybe exhaustion is showing you how rarely you allow yourself to rest without feeling guilty. Maybe jealousy is revealing where you have stopped honoring your own path. Maybe loneliness is showing you that you have been asking other people to provide a sense of wholeness that no human being can permanently provide. And maybe resentment is showing you that something inside you is ready to be released. Forgiveness becomes important here. There are people who may never apologize. There are conversations you may never get to have. There are explanations you may never receive. If your peace depends upon someone returning to the past and behaving differently, you have placed your inner freedom in the hands of something that cannot be changed. Forgiveness allows you to take that freedom back. This does not mean you invite everyone back into your life. Love can have boundaries. Compassion can exist from a distance. You can understand someone's humanity without giving them permission to continue hurting you. Forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Sometimes forgiveness is simply the moment when you decide, I no longer want this pain to occupy so much space inside me. At first, you may only be able to say those words intellectually. Your heart may still hurt. That is okay. Forgiveness can be like ice melting at the beginning of spring. It does not disappear because the calendar says winter is over. Warmth touches it gradually. Perhaps each time you remember the person who hurt you, you can bring a little warmth. Not for them, for yourself. Instead of rehearsing what they did, notice what happens inside you when the memory appears. Notice your breathing. Notice the tightening in your body. Notice the old story beginning. Then become present. You might quietly remind yourself, this happened then. I am here now. There is enormous power in that distinction. The past exists as memory in this present moment. And while you cannot change the event, you can slowly change the relationship you have with the memory. Eventually, you may discover that the person you most need to forgive is yourself. This can be harder. You may forgive others for being afraid while condemning yourself for the same thing. You may understand why someone else stayed in an unhealthy situation, yet ask yourself, how could I have been so foolish? You may offer compassion to someone else's mistakes, but continue carrying your own like evidence in a trial that never ends. But who is conducting this trial? And how long must the sentence last? There is something strange about punishing yesterday's version of yourself with today's awareness. You know more now. That is why you would choose differently. Your new understanding is not proof that the old you deserves condemnation. It is evidence that awareness has grown. Imagine meeting the younger version of yourself who made the decision you still regret. Look at that person not through the eyes of judgment, but through understanding. Perhaps they were frightened. Perhaps they desperately wanted love. Perhaps they were trying to survive. Perhaps they simply did not know another way. Would you stand before that younger self and say, "You must suffer forever because you did not know what I know now"? Or might you sit beside them? Might you say, "You were doing what you knew how to do, and now we know something different"? That is forgiveness. It is not erasing responsibility. It is ending unnecessary cruelty. And when cruelty toward yourself begins to dissolve, something remarkable happens. You no longer need to hide from your own heart. You become willing to be present with yourself. This is where love begins to feel less like an idea and more like a way of being. Love is often misunderstood as an emotion directed toward someone else. But from a spiritual perspective, love can also be understood as a state of inner alignment. When you stop condemning yourself, you move toward love. When you listen without immediately judging, you move toward love. When you choose peace instead of winning an unnecessary argument, you move toward love. When you release the need to make another person wrong in order to feel right, you move toward love. When you allow yourself to rest, grieve, change, or begin again without shame, you move toward love. And each movement toward love is also a movement toward your true nature. Fear asks, "How can I protect myself from life?" Love asks, "How can I remain open to life without abandoning myself?" These are very different questions. Love does not make you naive. It does not require you to trust everyone. It does not remove discernment. In fact, when you are no longer desperate for approval, you may see people more clearly. You can recognize what is loving and what is harmful without needing hatred to guide you. You can say no without resentment. You can walk away without revenge. You can remain kind without becoming available for mistreatment. You can wish someone peace without requiring them to remain part of your journey. This is inner freedom. And freedom changes your intention. For many years, your intentions may have come from fear. I need to succeed so I can finally feel worthy. I need this person to love me so I can feel complete. I need to prove them wrong. I need to make sure nothing goes wrong. These intentions contain tension because they begin from the assumption that something essential is missing. But what happens when intention begins from wholeness? Instead of asking, "What can I achieve so that I become worthy?" you might ask, "What would I create if I already knew my worth?" Instead of asking, "How can I make this person choose me?" you might ask, "How can I bring honesty and love into this relationship while remaining true to myself?" Instead of asking, "How can I control the future?" you might ask, "How can I meet today with clarity?" Intention becomes less about forcing life and more about aligning with the qualities you wish to express. Peace, kindness, truth, compassion, creativity, generosity, presence. Perhaps this is what living in harmony with the source can mean in everyday life. Not escaping the human experience, entering it differently. You still pay bills. You still have difficult conversations. You still make decisions without knowing exactly what will happen. People still misunderstand you. Plans still change. Bodies still age. Loss still visits. Spiritual awareness does not remove your humanity. It changes where you stand within it. Instead of standing inside every thought and believing it, you become the awareness that can observe thought. Instead of becoming every emotion, you allow emotions to move through you. Instead of defining yourself by each season, you remember that you are the presence moving through the seasons. The ocean remains the ocean, whether its surface is calm or covered in waves. Perhaps you are more like that ocean than you realize. Your emotions are waves. Your thoughts are waves. Relationships arrive and change like waves. Roles come and go. Your body changes. Your circumstances shift. But there is a depth beneath the surface that is not disturbed in the same way. When you become quiet, you can sometimes sense it. You do not need to name it. Some call it spirit, some call it awareness, some call it God, divine presence, or source. The name matters less than the experience. There is something within you that becomes visible when the noise becomes quiet. And this presence does not ask you to prove anything. It simply is. Perhaps that is why stillness can become such a powerful doorway home. You may sit quietly for a few minutes and initially hear only noise, thoughts about yesterday, plans for tomorrow, a conversation you want to replay, something you forgot to do. You do not need to stop these thoughts. Let them come. Let them go. Imagine sitting beneath a vast sky while birds fly across it. You would never try to hold every bird still. Allow your thoughts the same freedom. Gradually, you may notice the space around them. That space has always been there. And in that space, perhaps you can ask a simple question. What am I holding that I no longer need to carry? Do not force an answer. Listen. Maybe what appears is resentment. Maybe it is shame. Maybe it is an old identity. Maybe it is the need for someone's approval. Maybe it is an image of how your life was supposed to unfold. Whatever appears, you do not need to throw it away. Simply hold it with awareness. Then ask, would I be willing to loosen my grip? Willingness is enough. You do not have to know how everything will be released. A flower does not understand the mechanics of opening before it turns toward the sun. It simply responds to what nourishes it. You can begin doing the same. Turn toward what brings you closer to peace. Turn toward conversations that allow honesty. Turn toward silence when your mind becomes crowded. Turn toward gratitude when fear insists that nothing is enough. Turn toward forgiveness when resentment becomes heavy. Turn toward love when the ego demands another battle. And when you forget, return again. There is no spiritual failure in forgetting. The journey itself is a rhythm of forgetting and remembering. You become caught in fear, and then you remember. You compare yourself, and then you remember. You become angry and lose your center, and later you remember. You try to control everything, become exhausted, and eventually remember. Each return strengthens your awareness. Over time, you may notice that you return more quickly. A thought that once controlled you for days may remain for an hour. A resentment you once carried for years may begin dissolving. A criticism that once destroyed your sense of worth may simply become another person's opinion. This is not because you have become indifferent. It is because you are becoming rooted. A deeply rooted tree still feels the wind. It simply does not confuse the wind with its roots. And perhaps gratitude begins naturally here. Not gratitude forced upon pain. Not pretending to be thankful for everything that has happened. A quieter gratitude. Gratitude that you are here. Gratitude for the breath entering your body without your instruction. Gratitude for the morning light. Gratitude for one person who sees you clearly. Gratitude for lessons you are finally ready to understand. Gratitude even for the awareness that allows you to recognize when you have wandered away from yourself. You may begin to realize that ordinary moments contain an extraordinary amount of life. A cup of tea held between your hands, rain against a window, a familiar voice, the silence of an early morning, the feeling of your feet touching the earth. For years, perhaps you were rushing past these moments while searching for something larger that would finally make you feel complete. But life was here. The source was here. You were here. And this realization can bring a kind of peace that achievement never could. You do not need the entire future to reveal itself. You need only meet the life that is here. This is trust. Trust does not mean believing that everything will happen exactly as you want. It means beginning to believe that you can remain connected to your deepest self even when life does not happen as you want. That is a much more durable peace. You may lose something and still remain connected. You may change direction and still remain connected. You may not know the answer and still remain connected. You may stand at the beginning of a completely unfamiliar season and still feel something within you whispering, you do not have to know the whole road, just be here. And perhaps that whisper is the voice you have been searching for. Not the loud voice of fear. Not the voice that demands proof. Not the voice that compares. Something quieter. Something that does not tell you who you must become. It reminds you of what you already are beneath everything you have carried. And when you begin living from that remembrance, even imperfectly, life takes on a different quality. You stop asking every person to tell you who you are. You stop demanding that every circumstance provide peace. You stop waiting for the world to become perfectly arranged before you allow yourself to breathe. You begin carrying home within you. And once you discover that home, the final question is no longer how to find yourself. The question becomes much simpler and much more beautiful. How do you live each ordinary day without forgetting again? Perhaps that is the next invitation, not merely touching this truth in moments of stillness, but allowing it to enter the way you wake up, the way you speak, the way you forgive, the way you respond to uncertainty, and the way you walk through the world. Because returning to yourself is only the beginning. The deeper journey is learning how to live from the self you have remembered. And so the journey becomes less about reaching some distant spiritual destination and more about remembering in the middle of ordinary life where your peace actually comes from. You will still have mornings when your mind wakes before your heart does. Before you have even left your bed, thoughts may begin arriving, what needs to be done, what someone said yesterday, what might happen tomorrow, what you should have done differently. The old patterns may return because patterns do not disappear simply because you have become aware of them. But now there can be something new. Before following every thought, you can become still for a moment. You can notice your breathing. You can feel the life moving quietly through your body. You can allow yourself to recognize that before the demands of the day begin, before you become a parent, a partner, a worker, a friend, or whatever role the world asks you to play, you are simply here, alive, aware, present. And perhaps in that brief silence you can remember, I do not need to become worthy today. I can begin from the wholeness already within me. That simple remembrance can change the energy with which you enter the day. You do not need an elaborate spiritual practice. Sometimes 5 quiet minutes are enough to notice how far your mind has traveled from the present. Sometimes 1 conscious breath can interrupt an old reaction. Sometimes a moment beside a window, watching the morning light move across the room, can remind you that life is happening before your thoughts have had a chance to judge it. Stillness is not an escape from life. It is a way of returning to life without all the noise you have placed around it. And as the day unfolds, awareness can become your companion. When someone says something that irritates you, notice what rises before you react. When comparison appears, notice where your attention has gone. When you feel the familiar urge to please someone at the expense of your own truth, notice it gently. You do not need to condemn yourself. Simply notice. Awareness itself creates a pause, and within that pause lives choice. Perhaps you will still react sometimes. You may become impatient. You may say something you regret. You may spend an afternoon worrying about a future you cannot control. Then remember again, there is no need to turn spiritual growth into another reason to criticize yourself. The moment you recognize that you have wandered is already the beginning of your return. You can come home 1,000 times. The door does not close. This is also where gratitude becomes a beautiful daily practice, not as an obligation to pretend everything is wonderful, but as a way of noticing what fear often overlooks. Fear looks at what might disappear. Gratitude notices what is here. Fear says there is not enough. Gratitude notices this breath, this moment, this small piece of life that has already been given. You might become grateful for very simple things: warm water, a tree outside your window, the sound of someone you love laughing, a quiet meal, the ability to begin again after a difficult day. These things may seem ordinary until you realize that your entire life is made of ordinary moments. If you continually wait for extraordinary circumstances before allowing gratitude, you may miss the sacredness hidden inside the life you already have. And when something painful happens, gratitude does not require you to deny the pain. You can grieve and still be grateful for having loved. You can feel uncertain and still be grateful for this moment of safety. You can experience disappointment and still recognize that your worth has not disappeared with the outcome. 2 things can be true at once. You can be healing and still hurt. You can be peaceful and still have unanswered questions. You can trust life and still feel afraid sometimes. Your humanity does not disqualify you from spiritual peace. Perhaps your humanity is exactly where that peace is meant to be practiced. Forgiveness can become part of this daily remembering too. You may notice an old resentment returning while driving, washing dishes, or lying awake at night. The mind may invite you back into the familiar courtroom where you replay what happened and imagine what should have been said. When you notice this, perhaps you can quietly ask yourself, do I want to carry this for another moment? Some days the answer may honestly be yes. Perhaps the wound is still tender. Do not force yourself, but eventually there may come a day when something inside you says, I am tired of carrying this. Listen to that voice. It may be your soul making room for peace. Release does not always happen once. Sometimes you forgive the same experience many times because another layer of pain becomes visible. That is not failure. It is simply another season of letting go. Trees release leaves every year. The ocean releases every wave. The sky does not hold yesterday's clouds. Life itself seems to whisper that freedom requires movement. And perhaps you can learn to trust that movement. When something does not unfold according to your plan, instead of immediately deciding that life has betrayed you, allow a little space around the event. You do not know yet what this moment will mean. Some of the endings you once feared may eventually become openings. Some of the unanswered questions may lead you toward deeper understanding. Some of the people who leave may create space for you to meet yourself more honestly. You do not need to romanticize loss. You only need to leave room for life to reveal more than you can currently see. Trust is not knowing what happens next. Trust is being willing to walk without demanding that the entire path be illuminated. At night, a traveler does not need light for the whole journey. A small light showing the next few steps can be enough. Your awareness can be that light. Your intention can be that light. Love can be that light. Each morning you can quietly ask, what quality do I want to bring into this day? Not, what must I accomplish to prove myself? But perhaps, can I bring a little more patience? Can I listen more deeply? Can I respond from love instead of fear? Can I remain connected to myself even when the world becomes noisy? This is intention without force. You are not trying to command life. You are choosing the consciousness you bring to life. And slowly, almost without noticing, you begin living differently. Not because you have become another person, because you have stopped abandoning the person beneath all the roles. You may find that you need less approval. You may become more comfortable with silence. You may stop explaining yourself to everyone. You may recognize sooner when fear is speaking. You may find it easier to let another person have their opinion without carrying that opinion home inside you. And perhaps you begin to feel something you once searched for everywhere. Enoughness. Not because everything in your life is perfect, because you are no longer asking perfection to give you permission to be whole. This is the freedom your soul has been calling you toward. Not freedom from every difficult experience, but freedom from the belief that every difficult experience defines you. Not freedom from uncertainty, but freedom from needing certainty before you can live. Not freedom from the past, but freedom from carrying the past as your identity. Not freedom from being human, but freedom to be fully human without forgetting the spiritual presence within you. So when you feel lost again, as every human being sometimes does, perhaps you can remember something very simple. You do not have to search farther. Become quiet. Notice what you are carrying. Notice what you are believing. Notice where fear has taken your attention, and gently return. Return to this breath. Return to forgiveness. Return to gratitude. Return to love. Return to the awareness that existed before today's worries appeared. Your soul is not somewhere far away waiting for you to become enlightened enough to reach it. It is here in the silence beneath your thoughts. It is here in the compassion you offer yourself. It is here whenever you choose understanding instead of judgment. It is here whenever you release what you can no longer change. It is here whenever you stop demanding that the world tell you that you are enough. Perhaps what you have been searching for all these years was never missing. Perhaps it was simply covered by fear. Covered by expectations, covered by old stories, covered by the endless effort to become someone worthy of the peace that was already yours. And now you can begin uncovering it, not through force, through awareness, not through judgment, through compassion, not by becoming someone new, by remembering. Remember the sky beneath the clouds. Remember the ocean beneath the waves. Remember the tree that releases one season and quietly prepares for another. And remember yourself beneath everything you have been told you must be. There is still a place within you that knows how to be still. There is still love beneath the fear. There is still light beneath the stories you have carried. There is still a connection to something larger than your worries, your mistakes, your roles, and your past. Call it spirit, call it source, call it divine presence, or simply sit quietly enough to feel it without giving it a name. And when you feel it, even for a moment, perhaps you will understand why this journey has always felt strangely familiar. You were never traveling toward yourself. You were remembering the way home. So wherever you are in your life today, allow yourself to begin there. You do not need to have everything healed. You do not need every answer. You do not need to know what the next chapter will look like. You only need the willingness to stop leaving yourself behind. And perhaps tonight, before you sleep, place one hand over your heart and become quiet for a moment. Let the day be finished. Let the unanswered questions remain unanswered. Let tomorrow wait outside the door. Then ask yourself gently, what am I ready to stop carrying? Listen without forcing an answer. And whatever comes, meet it with love. Because the deepest spiritual journey may not be the journey toward becoming more. It may be the journey of releasing everything that convinced you that you were ever less. If something in this journey has spoken to a place within you that you had almost forgotten, share what you are remembering in the comments. Your reflection may become a quiet reminder for someone else who is finding their way home. And if you would like to continue exploring these journeys into awareness, forgiveness, peace, and the deeper self, you can subscribe and return whenever you need another moment of stillness. Until then, move gently through your life. Forgive when you are ready. Release what has completed its season. Trust what you cannot yet see. Choose love whenever you remember. And whenever the noise of the world causes you to forget who you are, become still enough to hear that quiet voice again. It will not ask you to prove yourself. It will not ask you to become someone else. It will simply call you back beneath the fear, back beneath the judgment, back beneath the story, back to the loving presence of the source within you, back to peace, back to yourself.